Hello and welcome to Three Gaits Volunteer Training, the online component. Today we're going to cover some basic things about Three Gaits and what we would typically cover in the sit-down portion of volunteer training. My name is Angela Poster and I'm one of the Three Gaits instructors. I teach on Thursday nights, and I also recently took on the role of being the volunteer coordinator out at Three Gaits. So you may see some emails from me regarding scheduling and recruitment and training, because that is a new role that I am taking on. And with me today is...
Hi, I'm Bethany Demoto. I'm an occupational therapist that works at Three Gaits, and I'm also a certified instructor, and I teach usually on Fridays.
Perfect. So if you're not familiar with Three Gaits has been around since 1983. We have a farm, a 20-acre farm in Stoughton, Wisconsin. We offer safe and effective and affordable horsemanship activities to individuals with special needs. We work with a really wide variety of riders from ages 2 to 80 or 90, and a whole host of different abilities and disabilities. And our job is to bring horsemanship activities to people who have special needs.
Yeah, absolutely. The staff at Three Gaits is made up of 3 full-time employees, which includes our equine caretaker, our executive director, and our office administrator. And then the rest of the staff is all part-time. So these are instructors and therapists that work at Three Gaits as a nonprofit part-time, in addition to other work outside of Three Gaits.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of how volunteers help at Three Gaits, do you want to start talking about the different programs, Bethany?
Yeah, totally. We offer a couple different types of programs at Three Gaits. The most traditional and most common is our lesson program. So these are taught by PATH certified instructors, and PATH is the umbrella organization for therapeutic riding programs. And the lessons are teaching riding skills. So we're teaching horseback riding to individuals who have disabilities. So the lesson size is typically between 2 to 5 riders, and it varies night to night on the ages of kids that we have. We also have an OT and PT program. So this is what we call hippotherapy services, where we're using a horse as a therapeutic tool in order to have functional gains. And then we have unmounted programs as well, which are offered looking at expanding function in individuals with disabilities with horses on the ground. So these are not riding programs, but they're things like helping out around the farm or helping out in the office, different types of programming like that.
Exactly. So the vast majority of volunteers at Three Gaits help with the therapeutic lessons. The reason for that mainly is just quantity. In our summer session, we might have 160 riders per week that are in our therapeutic riding lessons, whereas there's maybe 20, 25 in hippotherapy, and then maybe only 2 or 3 in the unmounted activities. So we rely on a ton of volunteers to help us with our lessons. And typically what volunteers do when they help out in therapeutic riding lessons is grooming the horses, tacking the horses, leading horses during lessons, and sidewalking, which means walking next to a student and supporting them with how they need support. So like I mentioned before, we work with a really wide variety of riders. Some of our riders are completely independent and they don't need any help. They come out to groom and tack their own horse, and they don't need anybody around other than the instructor to supervise. And then we have other riders that need somebody to get their horse ready for them, be clipped on and lead the horse the entire time, and then 2 sidewalkers to maybe physically support them so that they can sit upright. There's a really big variety in the riders that we work with. And in terms of schedule, we typically offer therapeutic riding lessons Monday through Thursday evenings, and then Saturday mornings. That's historically been our schedule, although Bethany does have some therapeutic riding lessons on Fridays as well. And then we have our OT and PT therapy typically happening during the day. during weekdays. So if you happen to be available, mornings or afternoons, those are more of our therapy sessions, where evenings during the week are our therapeutic riding sessions. And then on Saturday afternoons, we also have the therapy going on. And in terms of a time commitment, typically people commit to coming for an entire duration of a session, which is 12 weeks long. We have a spring session, a summer session, and a fall session. And during those 12 weeks, some people come for 1 or 2 hours, some people come for 5 or 6 hours, but usually the average is about 3 to 4 hours, I would say. And again, during that time, you're helping with the horses and with the clients in lessons. So we do realize that not everybody has the availability to commit that amount of time to volunteering or regularly volunteering, or they're not interested in helping with lessons. We have some people that want to help, but they don't really want to get involved with horses. There are some other ways that you can get involved, or somebody that you might know and want to rope into a program. We love that too. Like I mentioned before, we have a 20-acre farm, so we have a lot of roles that volunteers fill on our facility, things from unloading hay in the summer to cleaning stalls, which happens 6 days a week. We have some people who have horse experience who come to us and help with chores, feeding the horses hay and grain. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved around the facility if that's something that you're interested in doing. We also have an office building on our property, and we, use volunteers to help us with things like computer database management, paperwork, and we'd love it when people are willing to do some light cleaning around our office, because we have such a small staff. We don't have a cleaning person on staff, so occasionally we have volunteers do things like vacuuming and dusting, and we super appreciate that. We are a nonprofit organization, so we do host a series of fundraisers throughout the year, and sometimes we have volunteers get involved with the organizing of a fundraiser and or the actual fundraiser the day of. So if that's something you're interested in, please contact us about that. And then lastly, we do have some special events that we host around the farm, so occasionally we'll have volunteers that say to us, I'm not able to volunteer in lessons, but let me know if you have a special event coming up. So for example, we have an open show on the 4th of July where we need people to come out and hand out ribbons to the participants and help with parking. So that is definitely a way that we utilize volunteers as well.
Great volunteers come in all shapes and sizes. Like Angela said, we have a lot of different programming. It's not just lessons. This also includes things like fundraisers, special events, work in the office. But all great volunteers, we're looking for a couple different qualities. So we're looking for consistency. We're looking for people who, if you're signed up for lessons, we would like for you to be able to commit to the entire duration of the session, which is 12 weeks. If you're in a different role, the consistency might vary, but we like to see the same face. We like to be a community and be a family here at Three Gaits. Flexibility, so during any given night, you might be sidewalking with one class, you might be leading in another class, you might be leading a different horse than you did the previous week. We're looking for people who are able to ride the waves and roll with the punches in order to have a great, safe, and effective lesson. And finally, we're looking for volunteers who are able to communicate. So if you're not able to be here, it's incredibly helpful if we're given advance notice, because then we can find somebody to come take your place, because each volunteer spot is incredibly vital and important, no matter the night of the week, no matter the activity. And so we'd love to be able to find someone else who could step in and try and fill your shoes for that night. And then also communication to say what's going well. It's hard for the instructor, if they're just standing in the middle of the arena, to be able to have that intimate relationship with each rider that's there, and you have a very unique opportunity to be right next to them and say, hey, I noticed that I had to give a lot more assistance today than I did the previous week. And that helps us know too, oh man, these volunteers are needing to do more or less, and that helps us advance our students appropriately and gauge that. The first time you come and volunteer, so since you're doing some of this as an online component, we are happy to match you guys with an experienced volunteer to shadow. So when you get to the when you get to the property, we always ask that you go into the main office. We have a volunteer logbook there where everyone should have a sheet where you should log your hours. Drive time is included. We're a nonprofit, and so including drive time in your volunteering hours helps us apply for grants as well. And then also just gauging your comfort level. So communicate with the instructors that are there, meet them in the office. If you go in the office and they're not there, you'll probably be sent out to the barn because lessons might be already underway. And then communicate with the volunteers saying, hey, I'm new. I have some horse experience or I have no horse experience. And that helps us match you with a volunteer who's going to be a good fit in order to help teach you some of the hands-on components and the ropes of what the routine of lessons look like.
Exactly. Yeah, and I always tell people too, you know, if you're not comfortable 100% like bridling a horse for the night, and you know, I ask you, hey, can you go get Dylan ready for lessons, and you've got the bridle in your hand, don't do it if you're not comfortable. Communicate with us and say, you know, oh, I need a little supervision or help on this, and we are so happy to do that.
And that's where the communication piece comes in too.
Definitely.
Helping us know where you're at is incredibly helpful. Yep. And we're trying to offer additional continuing ed opportunities and learning opportunities for our volunteers, especially going into this year. So if you have a skill that you're interested in pursuing or something in lessons that's challenging, let us know, because we're looking at hosting events that are going to be geared towards the volunteers that we have.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you want to talk about working with our riders?
Yeah, absolutely. The riders that we have vary in age pretty significantly. So there are going to be some classes that are going to be younger kids, some classes that are teenagers, some classes that are adults. It just depends on the lesson time and the night of the week. So overall, we want to make sure we're using people first language. So we're avoiding labels and we're seeing the person. So this is referred to as, instead of saying an autistic child, we're going to say a child with a diagnosis of autism or a child with autism, because we are honoring the person first before we're giving them any type of attribute. So this helps us also see the strengths in our riders too. A lot of times we're not going to communicate as instructors every diagnosis that individual has, because we want to protect their confidentiality. And it's also not always vitally important, because we're looking at their abilities and what they can do and their strengths and lessons. So as a volunteer, it might be communicated to you that, just so you know, the rider that you're going to be matched with today sometimes has a hard time paying attention. It would be really helpful if you would remind them to look into the arena. So we are going to be using person first language and seeing the strengths that we have in order to communicate how you can be the most effective. And then finally, we want to encourage independence too. These riders are coming to learn. They're not coming to sit on a horse and be led around in a pony ride. So we want them to be as involved in the learning process as possible. So therefore, if an instructor says, hey, we're going to let them try and do it by themselves, that's because we're really trying to foster that independence. So using the least restrictive amount of assistance is usually how we refer to it. So the least restrictive amount of help.
Perfect. Yeah, I just want to comment too, real quickly on volunteer confidentiality. We always tell people we love it when you share your experiences at Three Gaits, you know, with friends and family, because volunteering is so fun and so rewarding. I've been there, done that. That's how I started in 1997. And you're going to want to talk about Three Gaits, and please do, because that's how we spread the word and get more people involved. We just ask that when you're sharing experiences, share your experience and not a rider's experience. Specifically, don't use names of riders when you're talking about Three Gaits, please, because you never know if you're in a coffee shop and you're talking about Joe and Joe's grandparents happen to be sitting behind you. You know, it's a small world, and Stoughton and Oregon and Madison are pretty small communities in terms of, you know, people knowing other people. So we do ask that you keep some confidentiality in terms of working with our riders. But again, we love it when you share your experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to talk a little bit about emergency procedures, and this is something that we will practice with you too when we see you in person. But just to cover some of the basics, I always like to talk about priorities during emergencies, because honestly, it's a little uncomfortable. we love our horses, love, love, love our horses. And they are so important to us and so near and dear to us. And I guarantee when you start volunteering, you're going to have a favorite, and then you'll have 3 favorites, and it just snowballs. But I do need you to remember that if there is an emergency, we have to prioritize humans before horses. We have to make sure that volunteers, riders, families, everybody is accounted for, and then we get our horses to safety. So that's just kind of a guiding principle that I like to mention, because it is frankly a little uncomfortable to talk about. But we do have kind of 3 different emergencies that we like to make sure that people are aware of and prepared for. So if there is a fire on the facility, we have a pavilion that doesn't have any sides on it. It's just kind of a covered area that's in the middle of the property. That is our meeting place. So if there is ever a fire, we ask that all humans get to that meeting place so that we can do a head count and make sure that everybody is accounted for. If all the humans are safe, then we will certainly take care of getting our horses to safety as well. When you are at Three Gaits in person and we give you a tour, we will make sure to point out where our fire extinguishers are so that you're prepared on that account as well. In terms of severe weather and tornadoes, we try our best to make cancellations in advance if we know that there's going to be severe weather. And what that will look like is, if you're signed up to volunteer on Tuesday evenings and the forecast, is severe thunderstorm warnings, we will either email or call you in advance to say that we're canceling for tonight, don't come out, because we'd rather not have people on the property if there's going to be severe weather. But occasionally, you're out there on a Tuesday and at 5 o'clock it's sunny, and by 6 o'clock it's horrible out there. So in case of severe weather or a tornado, the most secure building on our property is our office building. So we ask that that is the meeting place for humans. Again, we want to make sure that everybody is accounted for, and that is where we would be in case of a tornado. Then the last one, rider falls. We are a riding stable, and falls happen. It's part of learning. Part of, growing as a rider occasionally is making mistakes, and we do everything in our power to make sure that falls don't happen, but occasionally they do. So we need you to know what to do if there is a fall. And the first thing I need you to remember is that you have to follow the directions and lead from the instructor. That is crucial. So typically if a rider falls off, everybody stops in the arena, even if it's not on your team. If somebody else fell off their horse, everybody would stop, and the instructor would give directions, Mercedes, stay here, Dylan's team, stay here, Darren's team, come into the middle. So we just ask that you pay attention to that. In our tour, when we see you in person, we'll make sure to show you where the first aid kits are on the property. All of our instructors and therapists are trained in first aid and CPR, so if we needed to administer first aid or CPR to a rider, we could do that. And another crucial part about rider falls is staying in your role. What I mean by that is if you are a horse leader, your role is to make sure the horse is accounted for. If you are a sidewalker, your role is to make sure the rider is accounted for. And that seems like it would go without saying, but what we have observed in the past is that it's very tempting as the leader to reach back and try to grab the rider who's falling or on the ground. But if you do that, then you're not in control of the horse, and that could make the situation even worse. And vice versa, I've had people who are in a sidewalker role and the horse starts to do something and they go to grab the horse and, stop the horse. Well, then you're not supporting the rider. They need to be supported. So please, whatever you do, stay in your role. And typically what we say is if a rider falls, don't move them. Just leave them where they are until the instructor is able to approach and assess the situation. The only exception for that would be if they happen to land right under a horse and you deem that it's going to be completely unsafe for them to be in that situation, please, get them to a safe area. We also have had instances in the past of a horse getting loose, like if a rider doesn't have a sidewalker or a leader and they fall off and then there's a loose horse. So again, this is a moment where all the horses should stop, because horses are herd animals and they really read off of each other's energies. So everybody stopping and remaining calm is going to help calm that loose horse as well. At that point, the instructor would give directions for who should catch the horse and make sure the horse is secure and get the rider to safety. Now, I put a bullet in here about the importance of how we react to falls, because sometimes we make falls out to be a bigger deal than they are. And specifically what I mean by this is occasionally we've had, kids pop off of horses and land on the ground. And when they get down there, it's kind of a whoa moment of what just happened. And if they have everybody in the arena approaching them saying, are you okay? Are you okay? Oh my gosh, that won't happen again. Are you scared? It freaks the kids out, and they start thinking, whoa, that was, really a big deal. But if we approach the fall as, first of all, are you okay? And then, let's get back on. Let's try it again. I can tell that you're not hurt. Let's get back on, and this is how we'll change it this time to make it better. Let's go. And then we kind of just move on. It's really amazing how different a situation can play out with those sort of attitudes. This is not on topic, and I'm going to try to stay on topic, but we also run into that issue with, like when a rider is getting on the horse, especially if they're new or if they have a lot of anxiety, if they have volunteers saying to them, like, don't be scared, they're thinking in their head, ooh, is there something I should be scared of? And then it just kind of snowballs. So again, please stay calm, stay positive, and stay forward thinking when there is a rider fall. And then lastly, just in terms of how a fall can be made into a worse situation, people panicking is the biggest way, because not only do riders and other humans read off of that nervous energy, but the horses do too. If a horse has a calm and confident leader, they are much more likely to handle a situation in a calm and confident way. So please just keep your, sometimes as much as it takes your breath away, try to keep calm and stay in your role is kind of the biggest things. Did I cover everything there, Bethany?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to piggyback off of is the importance of how we react in the moment, and then also for the rest of the lesson. Sometimes we're getting back on and we're still going around. If we keep talking about like, oh, that was really scary when you fell off, or like, how did it feel to fall off? The more we bring it up, the more we're going to dwell on it, and it's going to be a scary situation. Like Angela said, it's part of learning. We really try to avoid it, try and have every safety precaution that we can in place, but horses are live animals and it's a sport. So sometimes it happens. And the best thing that we can do with these kids, if they fall off and they get back on, is to brush it off and, make one or two comments about like, I'm glad you're okay. That was kind of cool. Now you learned, and then move on. And
exactly.
we're not going to dwell on it over and over again.
Yep, exactly. So hands-on training is not required in order to volunteer, but it is super helpful. After you watch this online training, I will be following up with you on if we have any hands-on training events planned that you can participate in, because I always recommend that people come out and practice with the horses before riders are around. But sometimes it doesn't happen because of scheduling, or if you come to us mid-session and you want to volunteer, that's okay. Like Bethany said earlier, we can pair you with an experienced volunteer, have you shadowing them for the evening, and it's good. We can work with that. But I just wanted to put this slide up just so you know what components might be part of a hands-on training. In the barn, we would talk about general safety around horses, reading their body language, the cross ties, grooming, tacking, and then, we would talk about too what would happen if there's an emergency in the barn. And in the arena, again, this is something that we can't really cover on an online training, but things like how to hold a lead rope, what does the lesson look like, where do you stand while a rider is getting on. So those are all things that if you can participate in a hands-on training, I highly recommend it. So wrapping up here, I want to talk about the next step to start volunteering. If you are watching this and participating in this in the middle of the session, I will follow up with you with your next step to volunteer. But if you're watching this at the beginning of a session, what we have started to do is sign up volunteers using a Google Doc. And if you are not familiar with Google Docs, I have a short tutorial video that I can send to you that kind of explains them. But essentially, this is a live document that any of our volunteers can update, and you can see the updates in live time. You don't have to save it. The changes are saved automatically, which is really nice. And when you get the link to this document, it'll say that if you want to volunteer, you should add your name to the chart that's below. And then it talks about adjusting the time. If you can't come exactly at the time listed, you can adjust the time right on there, and I'll talk about that in a second. So if you're not able to volunteer regularly, you might want to consider being a substitute volunteer if you'd still like to get involved with lessons. And what that means is if we know we're going to be shorthanded on, say, Wednesday evening from 4 till 8, we'll contact a list of substitutes to say, hey, we need 3 extra volunteers next Wednesday. Are you available? And we really appreciate people who are willing to be on that substitute list. And also too, if you are committed to volunteering regularly, but you have some extra time and you're willing to come out an extra night a week if need be, tell us about that too. So the way you can do that is there's a hyperlink here that if you click on top of it, it pops up below it, and it will take you to a Google form where you can fill out your first name, last name, and then you tell us when you're available and just click submit, and that information comes to us. Pretty slick. Same thing with updating your contact information. We have a very similar link to report that. And then also, if you sign up for Thursday nights in the spring session, but you're going to be gone 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, if you can give us a heads up about it, then we'll contact substitutes when we know that you're going to be gone. So again, there's another hyperlink here. And last, just want to mention real quick, if you are working on a mobile device, sometimes it's tricky to access a Google Doc because you have to have the Google Doc app. So if the sign up is not working for you, I've got a troubleshooting link there. There are links here if you have a specific day that you want to volunteer, you can click on, but otherwise you can just scroll down. And what you'll see is that by each day we have the program listed. So it's either going to be therapeutic lessons or hippotherapy. We'll have the dates of the session. The hippotherapy tends to run less weeks than the therapeutic riding, so that's why we have the date.
10-week session.
What was that?
Usually a 10-week session.
10-week session, yep. And then we'll have the times that we need volunteers. And the way we determine that is we look at the clients that we have signed up, and we say, okay, this person needs 3, the other person in their class needs 2, so we need 5 people to be here at 1 o'clock. So we have these set based on the riders and the riders' needs. If you see an opening, that means we need a volunteer for that spot, so feel free to type your name in it like all these other volunteers have done. So again, you can scroll down, and all of the places that are typed in are already people that have signed up, but we do have openings. I just want to talk quick about Saturday mornings. So Saturdays are most convenient for riders, as you can imagine. If you have kids yourself, you know that if I'm signing them up for soccer classes, Saturday mornings are fantastic. But unfortunately, it's really hard for us to get volunteers on Saturdays because people have weekend plans, and we totally get that. But if you are at all able to commit to coming out on Saturdays, and even if you can tell us the weeks that you would miss, that would be phenomenal, just because it's historically our most difficult day to recruit, especially in the afternoons. Sometimes people like to start off their Saturday mornings at Three Gaits and then go do their other stuff, but Saturday afternoons get a little bit tough. So just thought I'd put a quick plug in for Saturdays. Do you want to talk about the volunteer manual, Bethany?
Yeah, just another plug for Saturdays too, though. That's also, if you're able to say you're able to be a sub,
yeah,
that would be probably one of the most helpful days, because
yep,
like Angela said, a lot of people have plans on Saturdays, so that's a day where a lot of times we're looking for subs because somebody has a vacation, or their grandma has a birthday party and they're not able to be there, and so Saturdays are a really helpful day for people willing to sub.
Yeah.
Everybody should have gotten the volunteer manual in an email if you're interested in volunteering. If you haven't, please let us know, and we will happily send that your way. It has a lot of really important process information, but I just wanted to highlight a couple things. What to wear. You're on horses, so we suggest closed-toed shoes. Flip-flops are not great for the barn because we have big feet, and we're not planning on them stepping on your toes, but it might happen. And there's also mud and poop and uneven terrain, so we highly suggest closed-toed shoes, and that's also a requirement for our riders as well. So hiking boots are great. Gym shoes are also great. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, just has to cover your feet. We also ask that you would avoid wearing short shorts or low-cut tops. If you think about it, you're going to be usually walking next to someone on a horse, so they're going to be standing from above you. So modesty is key, is they're able to look down. And you also want to be functional for the barn. So shorts are totally fine in the summer. We understand it's hot. Just be modest and aware of length of shirts and height of tops. And then we also highly suggest layers, especially in the spring and fall sessions, that sometimes when we start, it's not that cold, and by the end of the night, everybody's freezing and huddled up, or vice versa. Maybe we start and then everybody's hot from walking around. So layers are great. Our office is a great place to be able to throw your coat in between lessons if you're getting a little bit warm, but it's always better to be over-prepared than under-prepared at the barn. We also ask that cell phones, if at all possible, be kept in your car or silenced or in your coat in the office. They can just be incredibly distracting to the volunteer experience. And also, we don't want cell phones going off in lessons as well. And then finally, keep us updated on changes to your contact information. We want to be able to send things like information on special events. And if your email changes, get a hold of you and have good communication. So keeping us updated on changes to contact info is incredibly helpful.
Perfect. Last thing, if you are on Facebook, please follow Three Gaits on Facebook, and also in your search bar on Facebook, if you type in Three Gaits Volunteers, you will see that we have a group specifically set up for our volunteers, and that has been really helpful for us to post things like bridling tips and upcoming field trip needs some volunteers. So we are starting to use that more and more to communicate with people. So if you're on Facebook, please join us for that. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me or any of the other staff members because we are more than happy to help, and we're just really excited to have you join us as a volunteer.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for watching our online training. And again, we look forward to meeting you, and we'll see you soon.
Nice to meet everyone.